What's going on today, guys? Welcome to the Big Dogs Podcast, episode number 1. Today, we're on the topic of epic heroes, specifically Chris Kyle of American Sniper. Today, you're going to be talking with me, Mason, and my co-host, Isaac Reyes.
Pleasure.
So, the topic of epic heroes. Isaac, what do you think are some traits that encompass a hero?
Well, Mason, I think some traits would be selflessness, being charitable, and having the greater good in mind.
I definitely agree with that. I feel like those are things that, we'll get into this later, but those are some of the things that people like in our police and our military really encompass, and those to me are some of the biggest heroes in today's society.
Definitely.
So, we've been given a list for this project and for this podcast of traits of epic heroes. Now, we got 7 traits. First trait is a noble birth. Okay?
Pretty good one.
Good one for, legends like King Arthur, things of that sort. Another one we got is capable of great deeds of strength and courage. That's a big one. A lot of people are capable of that, but to the extent that these heroes are, nobody really matches that. We got they're great warriors. A lot of legends are great warriors. A lot of heroes are great warriors. Travels over a vast setting. A lot of people can do that, but what's the real reason behind it? You know what I mean?
Selfless.
National heroism. There's not many people that can be considered national heroes in today's society. Another one is humility, and then faces supernatural foes or receives supernatural help. So, in reality, how many supernatural cases are we really dealing with in today's society?
Not very many, I can say that for certain.
I'd say that whether you believe in God or not, or some type of God, that's probably the biggest quote-unquote supernatural that is going to happen to anybody today. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely have to agree. You don't see lightning bolts come out of the sky.
Right. It's not like Zeus is throwing stuff down at us, trying to see what people he can burn with a lightning bolt.
Not anymore, and probably never happened.
Probably right. So, to come all around to the topic of this, Chris Kyle, the American Sniper, most people have either read the book or seen the movie. I'm assuming most people listening to this have probably seen the movie. I don't know about read the book. So, on a general sense, what do we believe makes Chris Kyle an epic hero?
Well, for one, he had the guts to join the Navy SEALs, the most deadly, efficient, and cool fighting group in the world.
And not to mention just the Navy SEALs, he was part of SEAL Team 6, the top echelon, the best of the best Navy SEALs on anybody in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say some other traits he has are?
Well, for one of it, he cared about his fellow soldiers. He was put in a lot of situations where most soldiers it would be understandable if they'd fall back to get help, but he in his own way thought, you know what, I am the help, and he put himself out there. He put himself on the line, and he saved countless numbers of his own soldiers and civilians.
And I would say it even extends as far as not even soldiers, but just people in general. We can get into one of our first examples here. When he was younger, when he was in high school, he talks about in the book how he used to get into fights a lot. One of the reasons is, growing up on a ranch, on a farm, he thought it was kind of fun to fight. But not only that, his dad told him from a young age that if he starts a fight, he's going to be in trouble. But if he's the one to finish the fight, it's a different story. And he believed that him standing up and fighting for other people at his school or around that couldn't fight for themselves, weren't the strongest, weren't the biggest, he felt like it was his duty to do that. It was something inside of him that just told him, hey, I gotta go get this.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing ever wrong with protecting yourself and others.
Especially people that can't protect themselves.
Agreed.
So, going on to some other traits. Capable of great deeds of strength and courage. I mean, Chris Kyle is known today as the top, how do I say this? He had the most confirmed kills out of any military member in the United States military. That's no small feat. How many years the United States has been around for a long time, and we've been fighting for a
200 years.
and we've been in wars. I'd say at least half of that time. We've been fighting somewhere, some people.
Somewhere, and all sorts of enemies. This guy had the guts to go out there and do his job. And just talking about the courage thing, this guy faced many times where it was not guaranteed. It was more than likely he was not going to get out of this.
Yeah.
So
he didn't know if he was going to come back home to his family. He didn't know if he'd see his wife ever again.
He didn't know
if he'd see his parents ever, his kids ever again.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. He put himself in some positions that
he put himself in the position to serve a greater purpose.
He did, and it was something inside of him that allowed him to do this, but also it was the training. Mm-hmm. He went through rigorous training in buds and sniper training. And he talks about in the book how in sniper training you had to make your own ghillie suit. You had to go wear that and find a cover somewhere, and real military snipers that had already been trained and everything would go through, and they would check to see if they could find you hiding out in the brush or wherever you were, and your suit had to be good enough. That deed or that great strength, that's not something that just came from inside of him. He was taught that, but his ability to use that so well to go out and protect all these people by getting all these kills was something that very few people would be able to do. It's not something that just you or I could get off the couch and go do ourselves.
Agreed.
And I think that really ties in with one of the traits as a great warrior as well. It's obvious. There's no question that he's a great warrior. If you try to argue it, there's something wrong with you. And I think not only you and I need to have a conversation, but you need to have a conversation with a lot of other people, because he's known as one of the better warriors that America has produced.
Agreed.
Another trait is he travels over a vast setting. I mean, this is pretty obvious. He fought in Iraq. His first tour was in Kuwait, where, I mean, he talks about in the book how big of a moment this first tour was, because obviously for every military man, your first tour overseas is a big deal. You're leaving home. You're not going to see your family. He had to spend Christmas in Kuwait. First off, who wants to spend Christmas away from their family anywhere? But to have to spend it in
a combat zone,
one of the worst places in the world.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Kuwait is not a nice place, and it probably will never be a nice place.
Mm-hmm. He was trying to make it a nice place.
He was doing his best to make it a nice place, but I don't think no matter what we do in that setting, it's probably not going to ever become a nice place. But go ahead.
And for him to, and obviously, my compatriot here is just talking about his first deployment. Speaking a little bit more about that, when you go in there, you're not battle tested. You've never been in combat. Training will get you far, but it won't get you all the way. Yeah. For you to go in there and literally never in your life has been shot at in anger is something that takes a great deal of courage to do.
There's a big difference between getting shot at with those sim rounds and getting shot at with real rounds. I can't imagine what I would do if somebody was shooting at me sitting on a building.
We'll never know. You'll never know until you're there.
Right.
You can talk hard all you want, but until you're in that situation and you're looking down the end of a enemy's barrel, you won't know until it happens.
Even, the closest thing that we're ever going to get to that is hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're stalking a prey. We're trying to go out and shoot a deer, a rabbit, whatever it is. In reality, in war, especially for a sniper, that's exactly what he's doing. He's sitting on top of that building, just like we'd be sitting in a tree stand or a blind, and he is trying to find the most dangerous person that is gonna do the most damage to not only himself but his fellow soldiers, and he's trying to take that person out.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to do that, it takes more than to be able to pull that trigger and do that takes more than I think any of us will probably ever have the courage to do in our entire lives.
And to do it again.
Right. And
you can do it the first time, and the first time you do it, and you understand what it really means, and then being perfectly willing to do it again takes a great deal of courage and personal strength and character.
And he talks about this. One of my favorite quotes from the book comes from right at the beginning, the first chapter, one of the first paragraphs, and it's probably not one of the most politically correct things, and most people really will not want to hear it. But he says how people ask him the number of people he's killed, and he says that he, one, doesn't know the number. He said, two, that you can ask a lot of different people and there's a lot of different numbers. But if you really want to know, go to the United States Navy and they might tell you. But they're probably just going to give you some random number. But what he says is that no matter what the number was, it wasn't enough. Because there was still people that he lost and soldiers that he did not protect because he did not kill more people. And I know that some people don't want to hear that, and I don't think that war is a great thing and that killing people is a great thing. But for him to come out and say that and be willing to
admit that he did not have that he's like, I may have done all that stuff, but it doesn't matter how much I've done. I have not done enough for my fellow. I have not done enough for my fellow countrymen and my comrade. And even say that about such a terrible thing is, like, in my opinion, and I think Mason's opinion, shows even more character, because he's willing to do something that's in some cases morally wrong, but in this case he is willing to go through the personal hell of having to take someone's life,
and
for his fellow man.
And to take somebody's life is something that no matter how much training you go through is never going to be easy. You're never going to be like, unless something is really wrong with you, you're never going to want to go out and be like, I want to kill somebody today. You just don't want that. But for him to be able to be like, I understand that I have to do this because it not only allows me to get home to my family, but it protects every other brother that I have out here and lets them go back home to their family too, because it's something bigger than just me. I think that's an amazing feat of courage and just guts, really, to have that.
Agreed, well said.
And to get back to travels over a vast setting, I mean, he went to Kuwait, other places in Iraq, all over America. Bud's training is out in California. He's a guy from Texas. I mean, Texas is
much different place.
Texas is about the most, I guess, for lack of a better term, American place in America.
Mm-hmm.
What do people think of when they think of Texas? They think of cowboys and guys running around with 6-shooters.
Mm-hmm.
And while it might not be the Wild West like we imagine it, in a lot of ways it still really is.
Has a spirit.
And to go out to California, which is the complete opposite. Let's be real.
Yeah, let's be honest. It's not very American.
It is nothing like Texas. For him to go out there and thrive and succeed and pass through Bud's training, I mean, he's from Texas, right? So, and he worked on a ranch. He chewed tobacco, right? He talks about early in the book how in Bud's you're not allowed to have that. So he snuck a 10 in. He brings it in. He gets caught with it. And the who he's training with, they caught him, found out, and made him eat it. He had to eat an entire 10. And I can't say whether or not I know what that's like or what that'll do to you, but I know from people that have chewed in the past and other people I know that having to swallow that, and he talks about it, how disgusting that is. So to have to do that, and then the training sergeant made him do push-ups and run, and he didn't even throw up. He just kept
it down like a man.
And the sergeant was so mad because he thought he was going to throw up and he thought he was going to make him look so stupid in front of everybody, but he didn't. It's just, if this guy was just something different.
This guy was built different.
He just was 100%.
And it was just like, and another thing, this guy was not. He wasn't old, but he was not younger. He was.
No.
How old was he, Mason? He was in somewhere in his
early 20s.
Well, yeah.
Early to late 20s, and I mean by the time he was out, he was in his 30s.
Yeah, and when you join the military, you're normal. Most people that join the military are in their like late teens, very early 20s. And you know what? For him going in there at a, granted, he was still in his 20s and such. Him going in there at that little bit of an older age, is still extreme. It again shows his character, because you know what? He's not, even though yes, he's still in his 20s. He's still got a lot of his vigor left in him, but he's not going to be as spry as some of these kids, teenagers.
Right. Yeah. Your body as a teenager is much different from when you're 18 to you're 25. Listen to any of our dads talk about what it was like to walk through the snow to school every day,
yeah,
or things like that, and how much harder it got once they got older. Another trait here we have is humility, and I think it's kind of a funny story that he tells. He met his wife, Taya, I think is how you say it. I'm not completely sure. We'll go with it. He met his wife at a bar. The SEALs and a lot of the military are known for liking to go out and drink and hang out at bars. He met his wife there, and his wife, not at the time wife, just a woman that he had met, told him that she thought SEALs were cocky. She thought that they were king ding-a-ling, they were this upper echelon of people, and he simply told her...
And he didn't deserve to be like that.
Right, and he simply told her, you know what, I am training to do things that you and most people are never going to want to do. I'm training to do things that you probably never want to hear about me doing, and I'm doing this all to protect you. What gain do I have from this? He had no gain from it. There was killing people, putting his life on the line wasn't helping him any. It's helping us. It's allowing us to sit here and talk about this. It's allowing us to go to school, to walk around, to do whatever we want. And so he just told her, he said, I don't think I'm cocky. I am putting myself out here. And she actually really liked his response. She thought that the humility that he showed in that response by saying, hey, I'm putting myself out there, not for myself, but for you guys, was something that was actually really humbling.
He said we. He wasn't even talking about himself. He was talking about the rest of his platoon, in his unit, and in his entire the entire SEALs, which is like he wasn't putting himself in it like individually. He was talking about all these different people. It's like we are all doing this out of non-selfish things. We are doing this for everyone else.
And the strength that it takes to be in the military is something that I just feel like is something I will never be able to bring myself to. I've thought about joining the military, but in the end, I don't think that I don't have the courage to do it. And the people that do, they deserve something beyond what we can give them.
Agreed.
Another trait here, national heroism. We talked about this a little bit, but in his first tour, he talked about something that was a really big deal to him and the other military members. He talked about how they were in a firefight. He was put with a Marine platoon as a SEAL sniper. He got put with the Marines just because that tends to be what happens with specialized people like snipers. They get put with different platoons from different branches simply because those branches and platoons may not have the specific skill set that they need. So we talked about they're in a firefight, and they were just laying down fire for hours and hours and hours. And finally, when they won and they were victorious, they raised the American flag up over the battleground. And that to him was like the ultimate sign of how strong not only they were, but we were as a country, that we can come out here on foreign soil, somewhere we really don't know. How well do you know the battleground? You fly your drones over it, you do some scouting, but you're never gonna know the enemy's land as well
The
as they
true
do.
fog of war.
Right. And to raise that flag up, to say we're America, we just came here and we just did what we did, was not only a big moment for him and those other Marines, but in reality, it should be a big victory for us as an entire country. For us to have the strongest military in the world, do we want to have to use it? No. But the fact that we have the ability to use it is something that should be,
And we're using it for good.
is something that we should be very thankful for, because many countries live in fear of what could happen to them by other places, and the fact that we have the ability to know that we're safe no matter what, and have the ability to help other people whenever they need it, whether or not you agree with America going into foreign wars or not, or things like NATO where we get brought into a lot of foreign conflicts. The fact that we have the ability and the strength to be in these foreign conflicts is definitely something to be proud of and be very thankful for. Another thing to touch on with humility is something, it wasn't talked about in the book, but it was a really sad moment and something I think that you can't bring up Chris Kyle without talking about, and that would be his death.
Of course.
After he got out of the military, he worked with people that had PTSD and who were really struggling back in their normal lives. War does some crazy things, and a lot of people come back and really struggle with it. And he was coming back, and he was taking ex-soldiers to like gun ranges and trying to, just shoot with them, kind of give them some normalcy, because when they were in the military, they were shooting guns like
That
crazy.
was their normal.
That, like I said, that was their normal. So he was trying to give them something that they were used to and kind of something to fall back on. And then after they were done, they could talk and try to figure things out.
Hang out and just for him to be there and just have another person that went through something very similar to what they went through.
Right. And it was a tragic event. He was killed at a gun range by somebody who was trying to help. That person pulled the gun out of the range and shot him. It's tragic because somebody that worked so hard to protect everybody else, and he was selfless in every sense. Nobody that goes into the military isn't selfless. But he took it to a whole nother level, coming back when he could live a normal life and not have to deal with this stuff anymore, and to try to help people is something that's just beyond what most people would do. A lot of people come back and they don't talk about being in the military. They don't want to talk about what they did because it's hard.
It hurts them. It's so hard to talk about something that so many people just don't understand. A vast majority of Americans just can never. They can be like, "Oh, we understand," but really, you can't understand the absolute ridiculousness of war, the untold stress that it puts on you, and just that being and everything. Like, for one, you come back to you're in the military you're in there for 4 to 6 years, 6 years total, and throughout that entire time, you're being screamed at, you're being put down, and then and it's very strict, and you're going, and it's everything's strict. Like, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you do this, you'll be court-martialed, and you've got this air of I have to stay in line or I will be put in line. And when you come back home, what is there? It's like, okay, no one's. It's kind of hard to handle. There's not this structure, this very structured thing that I don't have anymore.
That structure is gone. It's like us being in high school and going to college. There's a lot of structure in high school. We wake up at the same time every day. Mm-hmm. We go to school for 6 to 8 hours. For us, we're athletes. We go to practice. We're told by coaches what to do for another few hours every day.
Mhm.
In reality, we have very little time to do what we please.
Mhm.
Everything is very, very structured, and we have a schedule. We're creatures of habit. And
Mhm.
in the military, it's the same thing.
And it's just turned up to the 10th degree. It's turned up so much. It's hot. If you don't get used to it, then it will become an issue, and you have to get used to it. And you have to they rewire your brain to make sure that's how you think, and you don't deviate from it. And then you come home, and you're still wired. Your brain is still wired to be like that. It's like a very lesser example is when you've got school. When school summer break goes out, for the first couple of days, you still wake up at whatever time you're
And
waking
you have
up
no
for.
idea what to do because you're like, you have all this time, but normally that time is filled with doing so many things that you have to do. When you wake up in the morning and you're like, wow, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to lay on the couch all day. It takes you, this getting into a new schedule takes you time. So when you're in the military and have to go into something and come back into normal society and try to change something that you've been doing for 6 years, while that may not be a long time in the grand scheme of things, the mental tests and physical tests that you're being put through are innumerable compared to what we would, as an average American, deal with every day. So to try to come back into no structure and have to figure your life out after that is so difficult.
Agreed.
So I think we've hit all of the traits of Chris Kyle. I mean, obviously, he wasn't born anything special. He was an average American. He lived in Texas. He worked on a ranch. He's really, I guess, what you'd say a typical American.
Mhm.
Fighting against or with supernatural figures. I guess the closest thing to that would be God. He talked about throughout the book how he believed in God, but he wasn't somebody that went to church. He didn't do things like that, but he truly believed while he was overseas that God was with him the entire time and looking over him because he believed that he was doing the right thing. Besides that, I don't think there was any huge correlation to supernatural events or figures. So now we get to the subject of who in today's society should be considered heroes. I'll let you take this one for a little bit.
Well, obviously, since we're talking about we're talking about people in the military. I think practically every single service member, if you're a Coast Guard, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Army, and quite recently, Space Force. I think all of those people need to be revered as heroes because they are heroes. It doesn't matter if you are in the Space Force and you never see an enemy your entire life. Doesn't matter. You went into the service to better your country, and I think that is extremely selfless, and it shows a lot of character, in my opinion. And recently, with medical workers have been having to go overtime, like doctors and nurses. If you go in there and you're taking time out of your day to help people, yeah, you're getting paid for it, but you're still helping people.
And in a lot of situations, whether you're worried about the pandemic or not, whether you think it's a big deal, I know everybody has a differing opinion. I know we have specific opinions that we agree upon that not everybody does, but we're not going to get into that. But to be willing to put yourself out there and work in a medical field and put yourself at risk every single day, it's not something to bat an eye at. We definitely need to thank those people as they're keeping us safe from not only this pandemic but illness throughout all the time. I mean, we have definitely got more thankful for medical workers in this past year or so, but I believe that they are something that we should have been thankful for and revering long before any of this happened, as they've been doing this job and putting themselves at risk with many diseases and many illnesses for a long time. Right. And kind of another topic for discussion today, it hasn't really been talked about lately, but people have argued about defunding the police and things like that. And the police, I mean, they have, besides the military, they probably have the hardest job out of anybody. None of us like getting pulled over. None of us like getting a ticket. Usually, when you see a police officer,
you may have a negative view, like, oh great, it's a cop that really is very willing to pull me over and give me a ticket just because he wants more money. But you know what? When we do want them is when we are being shot at, or we are being robbed, or something terrible has happened. That is when we want those people the most. And
we never. Whenever you're in a situation with a cop, it's never something good happening. Either you're getting pulled over for doing something you weren't supposed to, you're in a dangerous situation, or you're doing something illegal. None of the situations where you're with police officers are good ones, but if we didn't have them, things would be so much different and so much worse. Going into the police force, you know that you're in a no-win situation. Mm-hmm. You know that people are going to be upset with you no matter what you're doing, even if it's the right thing. And those people should be revered at such a high level because they know that no matter what, they're not going to get a thank you when they have to go into a building with people that have guns and have to try to fight them. They're not getting a thank you after you get pulled over when in reality, they're protecting the rest of the people on the road, because whether or not you think or know that you can drive capable to the speeds you're going doesn't mean that everybody else around you is safe in that situation. So I think those people should be held to a high standard and are really heroes. And I think firefighters in the same sense. I mean, they legitimately run into burning buildings. They put themselves on the line
they put themselves in a position that could end absolutely horribly for them. They could be, at the very least, extreme harm to them. Extreme pain, suffering, and all that, and even ending up having to go through they could end up having to go through some of the most painful things that could ever happen to a human being. But you know what? They still go in there because it's the right thing to do.
And it's not really only those type of people. It's not only police and medical workers and those people that should be considered heroes too. I mean, somebody like Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves,
and ended up dying for it,
is a hero. I mean, we all know slavery is wrong. Nobody can argue that it was right. And the fact that he was willing to put his life on the line to end such a horrible thing, that's heroics. George Washington,
agreed.
He led our country through revolution. He led our country after the revolution. Imagine having to live in a different society. We live in the greatest country in the world, and to have the freedoms that we have, very, very few places have them. You can try to argue that other places are as good as America or have the things that we have, but in reality, no one does. You don't have the opportunity, the freedoms, the safety that you have in America anywhere else in the world. And that's because...
And able to put your own safety in your own hands.
Right. And that's not only because of the police and firefighters and medical workers, that's also because of people like George Washington, people like Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan, the great presidents that we've had. And there's thousands of other great politicians out there. and people that have done. Martin Luther King, he fought for civil rights. He was a hero.
Mm-hmm.
It's plain and simple. Those people, the people that he was
willing
fighting for,
to stand up,
needed more rights. It wasn't just the African American community. There was many other communities that needed rights that he fought for, and that makes him a hero as well. And so the last thing that we had to talk about was somebody that we know that should be considered a hero. And I think this is where really Isaac needs to take over, because we decided to talk about his brother Clayton, who is a Marine. So go ahead, Ike.
All right. Well, my brother, from a very young age, he always told me he wanted to be in the military. He wanted to be in the Marine Corps because he wanted to be, and as the Marine Corps say, the part of the few. He wanted to serve a higher purpose than what he was currently doing. So even against my parents' absolute, you are not doing this at all. He didn't do this right out of high school. He went to college and everything, and he could have went in as an officer, but he thought, you know what, I'm going to go in there as a normal rifleman. He signed up for the military. He signed up for the Marine Corps, and they shipped him out to Parris Island. He did his 3 months of boot camp. He came back for 10 days, and he went back for infantry training. And right now he is serving in the United States Marine Corps, ready and waiting for when his country needs him. And my brother's story isn't unique, but it shows that it is good that his story isn't unique, because that just shows that there are many people that are willing to go out there and do the right thing.
And it doesn't take an amazing story like Chris Kyle's to be a hero. You can be an ordinary person, but the willingness to sign up for the military and put yourself in danger to protect the rest of us, that's just something that you can't deny is something that is absolutely heroic. And there's no way you can say it's not. I think that we've touched on pretty much everything we've needed to. We've had a really good conversation here. I know that this is something that I had to do for a project for a class, but the possibility of starting up and talking about more topics and more podcasts to come is something that is definitely a possibility and will most likely happen. So thank you all for listening to the Big Dogs Podcast, episode 1. Mason and Isaac, we're out.